Welcome to Backseat Directing.
Where we talk about movies, TVs, podcasts. No.
Movies.
It is a podcast. Movies, TVs, comics, and more.
Yeah. Alright. Welcome to Backseat Directing.
Where we talk about movies, TV shows, comics, and more.
We're your hosts,
Andrew.
and Aaron, and we have a guest, Corey.
Today we're going to be talking about the ultimate bending style from Avatar The Last Airbender and having a great debate.
Alright, let's get into it. See how professional this is? So,
Pretty good.
I mean, we got lights.
We got lights.
There's a big ass light.
it's hot in here because of those lights too and all these people.
Okay, so today we're gonna have a debate with Corey about our favorite, each of our individual favorite bending style in Avatar: The Last Airbender. We'll talk about the structure of the conversation in a second, but Corey, do you want to introduce yourself?
My name is Corey Trahan, former college basketball player, greatest three-point shooter in the greater tri-state area, you know what I'm saying?
Maybe a little smaller than that, but
It's going to be nice to come on Arron and Andrew's show and, prove I'm right.
What's your background in terms of like pop culture? Nerd
Background in terms of pop culture, I'm definitely a blurred.
What do you like?
For everyone that doesn't know, that is a black nerd. So everything, anime, movies, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Marvel characters, you name it. I'm more of an anime guy.
Okay. All right. Those are kind of
Which is why my opinions on Avatar are going to be
subpar.
a little more
So,
qualified is all I'm saying.
That's the back of Corey's baseball card. So the debate style today is going to be just head to head. We're going to argue why our element is the best. We'll start off just giving us each a brief chance to go over an overview of points, and then we'll kind of open up into an open forum and hash it out from there, like gentlemen.
So
Like
before
gentlemen.
we go into the debate, though, the four elements: air, fire, earth, water. Right?
Yep.
For sure.
So there's one of them that's superior to all of the other three.
Very debatable, but not really.
I would generously like to concede the opening arguments to my opponent, Corey, and guest.
It's only
How
fair that you
respectful.
go
How respectful. How respectful. Andrew is going to want to try to rebuttal my points. However, I would just like to forebode before Andrew says anything about airbending, which I know he's going to because
You can't be sure. He's pointing at my shirt, if anyone's
oh my
listening.
God, my favorite character is the main character with the plot armor. So, let me start. Waterbending.
Hey, we're not here to talk about which character. is the
I'm-
best. We're
okay,
talking about
I-
which element.
It's
is
not the red
best.
herring. My bad. Andrew's the main character guy. So, waterbending is by far and away not my favorite, but if I had to say most powerful, the most powerful form of bending. Mostly because of blood bending. Secondly, because of the lunar phases. And thirdly, because of the sheer amount of water on the planet. Arguably, air could be the strongest because there's air in everything. However, I say
More air than water, might I add.
that the most impressive feats in the Avatar universe were all committed by primarily waterbenders.
Name
We
them.
had Amon taking away people's bending.
Done by Aang first. Sorry, it's your turn to talk.
It's our show. We can talk when we want.
We don't follow the rules. You had Tarlok whoop Korra with bloodbending when he really had to, and then most notably, we gotta cut out the stutter real quick. I gotta go to my points. All right. Most notably, Yakone could have killed Aang if he really wanted to. In the first scene when they're all in the courthouse and they didn't know they were what's it called? How Yakone could psychically blood blend, and all of a sudden he had Sokka everybody on their knees. He could have made everybody pass out, and you saw Aang being tortured, and he had to go into the Avatar state to break free from that. He probably, arguably, could have killed him before that happened because he tortured him for a split
I
second.
feel like your argument of why water is the strongest, most deadly element is solely based on bloodbending.
I mean, how common is bloodbending in the waterbending community?
It's not-
two, three,
three or four in the
three?
entire. Yeah.
It's not the most common, but I feel like if we're talking about the most powerful forms of bending, we have to talk about the most impressive feats in the Avatar universe.
Yeah, but
So
we
if
also have to talk about the average.
if we're arguing, hold up. If we're arguing about firebending, if we're talking about average, firebending is by far and away the strongest because everybody, as you can see in the Legend of Korra universe, most of the firebenders there were just shooting lightning out of their fingers for fun. So, lightning bending. They go blood bending, lightning bending, magma bending maybe.
We're
air
talking
bending.
about the elements as like a whole, not just the elite of the elite benders of the respective elements.
But if we're talking about the elements of a whole, you also have to acknowledge the sub-elements and what is possible.
We do. So before we go too far into the sub-elements and the elite of those benders, Andrew, let's hear your points of what your superior and favorite bending style is.
So
Yeah, I wonder what it is.
a little bit of a different approach from Corey. I took the ultimate element not to just mean the most powerful in a one-on-one fight, but the most versatile, the most adaptable, and generally the coolest and most fun to use element, which has to be airbending.
Because there's 3 forms of air, right? We could.
Well, I mean, airbendings can differentiate into spirit bending and flight. And just like, I mean, it's uncommon, just like there's 1, maybe 2 people who can use flight. But also, I'd argue that Aang uses flight in the end of Avatar The Last Airbender. But
they can also pretty much fly with their glider and
they have gliding, yeah. They have
when they're using their glider, they're flying. They're controlling it. They're not just falling.
Yeah, they're going up and down.
They can fly with their glider.
So here's a few reasons why.
Your waterbender can float.
For one, I'll
breathe
say.
underwater.
Listen, for one, I'll say airbending has the most impressive feats. So whereas your bloodbending might be powerful in a one-on-one fight, airbending historically has fought the actual the tide of nature. So Aang uses airbending to fight a volcano, and Roku uses airbending to also fight a volcano to save the village, and Kyoshi uses airbending to literally push an island. So she uses earthbending to separate it, but she uses the force of airbending to move an entire island. So those, in my opinion, are some of the greatest feats in Avatar. And then you've got as well the fact that it folds in basically 4 or 5 superpowers, because with the glider or with the advanced version of it, you have flight. You have super speed displayed by Aang in the episode where he has to get the toads for Sokka and Katara. He literally runs so fast that it can almost be not observed by the human eye. He can ride on an air scooter to move faster. He has all kinds of things for agility. He has immunity to fall damage. You can fall from basically any height and use a gust of wind or glide using air to lightly land on your feet that we see Aang do when he's fighting Toph. We have him being able to create an air cannon and fire projectiles at super speed, which basically means he can move rocks or water if you put them into the funnel in the air cannon. Also, we see literal telekinesis in the scene where he's fighting Zuko in that desert town. He draws fans into his hands, and we see Zahir draw the staff to his hand by pulling wind behind the object and drawing it to their hand. So the ability to manipulate objects. We see Boomy float a plate in the air by creating a sphere of air around it. Mm-hmm. So holding things in the air, drawing them to you, telekinesis, flight, super speed, like all of that flown in before you even mention the actual abilities of air punches, air kicks. You have super jumping abilities to jump really high.
And then the spirit bending, like you mentioned earlier.
And then you can differentiate into these other abilities that admittedly are rare, but it would definitely be the most fun to use. I mean, you're saying you wouldn't want to play that airball game from the beginning when he visits the temple?
I would most rather, more definitely, 100% more breathe underwater. Waterbenders can heal. If we're talking about feats, I strongly will say, I believe, possibly being able to kill the Avatar by literally just thinking about it, which I will admit is a 1 in a million scenario, just like Zahir with the flight. However, being able to just kill the Avatar, like, what if... Oh, we're gonna have to cut out that stutter. Hold up.
You don't have to cut out every stutter.
We're gonna have to cut out that stutter.
We're rolling.
While you look, I have a question. Can they actually breathe underwater, or can they just create a space of air around themselves?
They create a space of air around themselves.
So could an airbender not just create a sphere of air around their head and do the same thing?
Possibly.
So you could breathe underwater as an airbender. And you could use the force of the air to push yourself forward to swim super fast underwater.
Yukon, Noatak, and Tarlok are probably 3 of the strongest waterbenders that we see on top of Katara. Agreed?
Sure.
Sure? Okay. So follow me here. They were the driving force of the first entire season of Legend of Korra. And I know that you hate Legend of Korra.
I don't
however,
hate Legends of Korra. Don't put that on me.
Andrew's
It's not as good as
Andrew is
Avatar
a
The Last
hater of Legend of
Airbender.
Korra. Andrew is a Legend of Korra hater. I'm not going to try to get off point. All right. So,
We're staying focused here.
arguably, I would say that 3 normal human beings, although they have the ability to bloodbend at an extremely rare level without a full moon, could have taken a full-powered avatar.
You know what's so funny is I prepared for your argument that Aang's only strong because he's the Avatar. So you picked 3 people who are just waterbenders, who aren't avatars and are strong, elite, high-level air or waterbenders. So we also see huge, impressive airbending feats out of Zahir, out of Tenzin, out of Jinora, all of which not avatars and are just highly elite airbenders. Zahir even didn't have any experience and used airbending to decimate the entire community in
He
Legend of
basically
Korra.
killed her. And then she was like psychologically messed up for the rest of the season.
Zahir, I would say with his years of preparation, was just not a regular airbender. So that would be an anomaly. And Tenzin is of a direct bloodline from the Avatar.
Okay, what about Monkey Atso? Monkey Atso was shown to have defeated like 15 like powered up firebenders. When you find their skulls in the chamber, they were powered up with Sozin's Comet, and one airbender took them all out. When he was like 80 years old, and he pieced them with just airbending, no avatar state, just an airbender, old man airbender.
We're still talking about a extremely highly skilled airbender versus some lackeys.
And Yukon is what, like just some random like street level waterbender?
You got me there.
What about, so we're kind of talking about 2 elements here. Let's kind of go into firebending a little bit and earthbending and maybe why they're not your guys' top.
I think if we're talking in generalities, I think firebending is the strongest element because
I think it's the hardest to control though, which is a big negative.
I think it's the most
towards it.
destructive, which isn't the same thing necessarily as the strongest. I think airbending has the strongest defensive capabilities. There's different things you can apply strongest to. Airbending has the most agility and defensive
I think
capabilities.
fire, kind of like where you're going on. I think fire is maybe the most dangerous.
Earth has a lot of defensive capabilities.
I think Earth has the most defensive capabilities. Fire, if we're talking in generalities of most people can just use it, not be the greatest with it, and be successful in like combat and away from combat. Like earthbenders could just build a house if they felt like it.
They did conquer the whole world, firebenders. So.
Firebenders took over the entire world and were able to be like just this scary militia force. And after in Legend of Korra, when they were using lightning bending, the industry ran on them being able to use their powers for welding and things like that. So I think fire is very versatile in terms of we're not talking about feats, we're just talking about a group of benders. I think they're the strongest group of benders behind earthbenders because you look at Ba Sing Se and there's entire arcs where Iroh's a decorated general and even he couldn't break through the wall because it's just the defensive capabilities and the logistical capabilities of what they had been able to do with the earthbending and the postal systems and the giant Great Wall.
It's impressive.
Well, it's crazy.
I'll cut in with my answer to say that I'm going to kind of cheat and tie my answer back to my argument. So the reason I don't pick earth and fire necessarily is because they're not my favorite because they have like a glaring weakness in that they can't be used in certain environments. Because fire's not as effective if you're in the North or South Poles in this series, in the story. Earth, you literally, is a great element, but you literally can't use it if there's not earth. Like if you're in a steel building, a metal building, and you don't have access to earth, you can't use it. And I think that's one of the biggest weaknesses of water is that metal bending is 1 in 100. So with
By the time we get to Legend of Korra, though, metal bending's a lot more.
no, they say 1 in 100 in that show. Then they say Earth. They say lava bending's 1 in 1,000. Metal bending's 1 in 100.
Yeah.
So it's more common, but still
Yeah.
1 in 100 is pretty not great. So and then water bending, especially like the one you picked, is so hard to use if you don't have water. Because Hara, a very advanced waterbender, eventually learns to bend her own sweat, which isn't that much water. So drawing water from your own body. And Hama, I think her name is, the bloodbender from Atla, she can draw water out of plants and trees, but this is very, very high tier waterbending, whereas a basic airbender just always has access to air. Fire can be weakened, earth you don't always have access to it, and water is probably the one you have least access to unless you live in the water tribe or on a coastal community. You just have to keep water on you or hope that you find some.
I would say firebenders still have as much access to their bending as airbenders though, because they're the only bending that comes directly from chi. They're the only bending that comes directly from.
But in cold climates, theirs is weakened, whereas air is just air no matter where you are.
I agree with that
point.
To be fair, not most of the world isn't in a place where firebending's significantly weakened. But
then we look at even general firebenders like Zhao, Zuko, Azula, even the fire soldiers, when they were invading the northern water tribes.
50% of the time, each of those elements is weaker. I almost didn't even make that point. Air it's at its strength all the time, whereas water and fire, when the sun is out and the moon is out, is weaker. So air is ultimately the best. I think you can agree at this point.
No. No.
Most balanced, most adaptable, most versatile, has the offensive and defensive capabilities of the other elements. We see in Avatar The Last Airbender, the Fire Nation shoots a giant flaming rock at Aang, and he obliterates a boulder with air. Just blasts it with air and shatters it. Doesn't move it out of the way. Shatters a boulder with just the power of air. So air has the sheer force to destroy. Also, air shields, defensive capabilities. You can block any attack. Shown to block fire, combustion, just physical weapons like spears.
If we're going back to combat, waterbending is still the greatest, because if we're talking about just straight feats, if we're talking...
But what if you're in a ship, like they were in the final season? You know, where are you getting water from?
Like an airship, or?
Yeah, an airship.
You just gotta keep that little thing that Qatar has, and then you've got like 8 ounces of water. Hopefully you're super, super elite.
Right.
If we're talking in terms of feats, my argument is still... waterbending has still shown the greatest feats in the series. If we're talking overall...
What have they done greater than fighting a volcano and pushing an island across the ocean?
Now, I will...
Yakone could have just murked the Avatar. I think that's...
Killing one person is not more advanced than moving an island across the ocean.
Avatar. You're downplaying how much he could have just...
We should have came up with like a criteria.
Of what was the...
Yeah.
But fighting one person versus fighting nature, to me, is objectively a smaller accomplishment.
But you're still fighting the strongest person in the universe. And the entire...
So you admit that the strongest person in the universe was an airbender, originally?
The Avatar, he could bend all 4 elements. He's not just an
You're
airbender.
talking about Aang specifically.
Aang at one
Avatars
point
before him.
was Aang, Roku...
Come on, Corey, don't let him walk all over you.
Aang,
Corey, what about this point? What about this point?
Kyoshi.
Kind of help you out a little bit. If airbending is so strong and beneficial and there's limited resource, then why is there only one of them left?
Pacifism. So the only reason that the airbenders were wiped out is 1, because of Sozin's Comet, and 2, because they practiced radical pacifism. They didn't have an established military. All the other nations have an established military, and they are separated from the world, living the lifestyle of a monk. They don't have weapons. They train in airbending. They don't train in war. So they didn't want to fight. They weren't prepared to fight. They had a sneak attack come at them from people who were basically on firebender steroids.
Because firebending is reckless and dangerous and hard to control.
I mean, could the waterbenders have had any better success if they didn't have any form of organized military? Look at the Southern Water Tribe, already decimated by Fire Nation raids when they had a military.
I don't know where we're going with this. All right, backtrack.
We're right.
I feel like this is just the hardest question to answer at the same time, because Like we're all
It's a very broad
we're
question.
all looking at it from a different lens. Like
No, Andrew just finished his water bottle. He is out of his power.
I am now a useless waterbender.
Careful.
No, so we're all looking from different lenses. Like I want to look at it from a term of individual one-on-one feats. To me personally, bending nature or defeating a volcano is not as impressive to me as being able to murk the Avatar one-on-one or three-on-one, whatever. That is the strongest person in the entire Atlas core, whatever you want to use, universe.
I will admit my feats are from people who are both avatars.
Korra almost died too from what's his name of the airbending?
Yukon or
Zahir.
Zahir, yeah. Oh,
Zahir.
you said airbending. I don't know what. I wasn't
So
paying attention.
I'm taking feats from.
But like he could have killed the Avatar, so that's you have both elements doing the same thing. You know, almost killing the strongest person in the universe. So if that's your one argument, then we matched you.
If you're looking at a one-on-one fight and an airbender approaches a waterbender, if by some chance they have bloodbending,
It's a wrap.
I do believe you can still win that fight.
Okay, so I'm gonna need to hear this one then. So if we're taking my strongest waterbending feat is bloodbending, and your strongest waterbending feat would be or airbending feat would be flight. How is a powered up Zahir beating up a powered up Yukon? It's not happening.
Because of another point that I wrote down on my list of reasons, airbending
Andrew came prepared.
I researched. Airbending is hands-free. So I don't necessarily need to have control of my arms and legs to
Yukon
use
had
airbending.
that whole courtroom in shambles, including Sokka, everyone, with just psychic bloodbending.
Also, can you definitively say that there's no way to break out of bloodbending? We've seen Aang do it with the Avatar state. Who's to say there's not other ways to figure out of it? There just hasn't been that much. It's been a forbidden technique. There hasn't been that much use of it to need to combat it.
So if you don't know how to combat the technique,
Yet.
You have a good
no.
point.
You just shelved it. You just shelved it. If we're talking on a one-on-one feat, your powered up Zahir is not beating up a powered up Yukon. It's not happening. He literally is controlling his mind psychically. Even if we take into account any other feats that have not been seen at that point yet, theoretically, if we're pushing the theoretical button, Yukon just kind of splits his melon in half.
If we're talking about Zahir, he's also one of the strongest minds depicted in the Avatar The Last Airbender, well, in the extended Avatar entire universe. He's one of the strongest minds with his meditation and his spiritual connection. Who's to say he couldn't get out of bloodbending and a psychological control? I think that if anyone could do it, it's possibly Zahir.
If Aang had to resort to the Avatar state, again, plot armor with the strongest being in the universe, I don't think any regular human, unless they're a waterbender, is getting out of that.
If we go into the realm of plot armor, you could also say the only reason people can physically take Aang or physically take Korra is because of plot, because they need somebody to be able to hurt them in order for there to be a conflict and revolution. So that argument can cut both ways.
Nice little do-si-do around that one.
All right, so we talked about the elite of each element.
All right.
But what about just overall, your average bender?
Your average bender?
Which is most useful?
Useful. And we're just saying useful...
Useful...
Not fighting?
Not fighting. I would say earthbending.
Earthbending?
All right, I agree with that. I agree with that.
That's a perfect way to end the show. We're on the same level. We're all
because earthbending, you have to look at it. Earthbending was the only other power as strong as the Fire Nation, arguably, not military-wise, but defensive-wise, because nobody could break in. They were stronger than, I would say they're stronger than the Northern Water Tribe. They had the logistical system with their mail system, and they had the Dali and everyone. Like, it was crazy.
There would be no homelessness, because earthbenders can literally just build a home, like you said. And I imagine they're great farmers, because they're connected to the earth.
Yeah, that'd be a wrap. Like, overall usefulness, I think earthbending. But feats, I think me and Andrew could argue that all day.
Water's pretty sick as well, because you could build a house with waterbending, because the way they can turn water into ice.
Yeah.
I thought Andrew was going to say some crazy stuff about being able to, like, air slash through things, and you never hit me with it, so that's your fault. That's your fault.
He talked about it a little bit.
The destructive is offensive and defensive, baby.
All
right, I want to do who's your favorite bender, and then we'll close it out because we.
Okay.
Bolin, cool. That's it.
He's awesome.
Bolin and Azula.
Picked an earthbender. So your favorite is earthbending.
Oh, my
But
favorite.
You're arguing that water's the most powerful.
I only would argue that waterbending is the strongest because of bloodbending.
Yeah. My favorite is air, and I think air is the ultimate bending style.
I agree with Andrew. That's why we brought on Corey. So
we have a
wasn't
different
just me and him agreeing. the whole-
I mean,
the
that's
whole
a
time.
good point. That's a good point, sir. My favorite bender is probably Aang, but Toph is like really closely behind him.
Got tops up there.
I like Toph and Zuko.
Those are.
Or sorry, Aang and Zuko.
Azula's
Toph is
got
cool. If I had a top three, it'd be those three.
my top three would have to be Bolin, Azula. I want to say Korra. I just don't.
You
miss
guys
my-
are blasphemous because nobody said Iroh. I would say Toph, Aang, and Iroh. Iroh's
Aang, Iroh.
Iroh's S tier.
I just never listen. The fact that Aang is such a weenie, I can't handle it. Like
Get
also,
out of here.
He's also 12.
I understand that he's a 12-year-old, but like, come on, bro.
All right. Well, Corey, thanks for coming on and talking with us. It's been a good time. I'm glad
Love you, brother.
glad to disagree with you.
Glad that we all can agree that bloodbending
He
is the
eats fish
strongest.
fillet, so.
All right, everyone. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. If you like the show, please like and subscribe. Share with a friend. We're on TikTok, Instagram. You can listen on the podcast, Apple Podcast app, Spotify.
Please go ahead and give 5-star review. It helps us out a lot.
Leave a thumbs up. Also, Arron and Andrew are gonna link my highlight tape in the bio.
Yes, sir.
It's very short, so don't worry about it. You'll have time to watch it. Promise. All right, that's a wrap.